The champagne glass in my hand felt heavier than my mortgage payment as I watched my wife Lena throw her head back and laugh at her boss Julian's joke. The sound cut through the summer evening air on the agency's rooftop terrace like a knife through my dignity. "Seriously, Alex," Julian Hawke continued, his perfectly veneered smile gleaming under the string lights. "You don't deserve her. I mean, look at you two together." I glanced down at my off-the-rack khakis and polo shirt, then at Lena's designer cocktail dress that probably cost more than my monthly salary as a mid-level finance manager. The contrast wasn't lost on anyone at this corporate summer party, least of all me. Lena's laugh died down to a knowing smirk as she sipped her martini. "Oh, Julian, you're terrible," she said, but her tone suggested she found him anything but terrible. That's when Vanessa King, Lena's stunning coworker with the kind of legs that made traffic accidents happen, decided to twist the knife a little deeper. "Agreed. You deserve so much better, boss," she purred, her perfectly manicured hand touching Julian's arm. "Someone who actually appreciates what they have." The circle of agency employees around us chuckled like a pack of hyenas. I felt my face burn, but I forced a smile and took a long sip of champagne. If I had $1 for every time her co-workers looked at me like I was the janitor who'd wandered into the wrong party, I could probably afford to dress better. "Thanks for the vote of confidence, everyone," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm that sailed right over their heads. Really feeling the love here. Derek, the only real friend I had at this shindig, and the bartender who'd been watching this social execution from behind his makeshift bar, caught my eye and shook his head sympathetically. His punk rock past and current job slinging drinks at corporate events had given him a front-row seat to more office drama than a soap opera writer. "Another champagne, sir?" he asked loudly, giving me an excuse to escape the circle of sharks. "Make it a double," I muttered, walking over to him. "Rough crowd tonight," Derek said quietly as he poured. "Your wife's boss seems like a real piece of work." "Julian Hawke," I said, his name like it tasted bad. "Thinks he's God's gift to advertising and apparently to married women too." Derek raised an eyebrow. "You think something's going on there?" Before I could answer, I heard Lena's voice calling my name. "Alex, honey, could you get me another martini? Extra dry? You know how I like it." The way she said it, like I was the help, made my jaw clench. But I smiled and nodded because that's what good husbands do, right? We fetch drinks and smile while our wives flirt with their bosses in front of half the city's advertising community. As I waited for Derek to mix Lena's drink, I watched her work the crowd. She was in her element, all graceful gestures and practiced charm. At 38, she was still stunning, with the kind of blonde hair and sharp cheekbones that made men stupid and women jealous. She'd clawed her way up to PR director through a combination of talent, ambition, and what she called strategic networking. I used to think I was lucky to have her. Now I wasn't so sure she felt the same way about me. "Here you go," Derek said, handing me the martini. "And Alex, whatever's going on, just remember, sometimes the quiet ones surprise everybody." I took the drink back to Lena, who accepted it without even looking at me. She was too busy listening to Julian explain his latest campaign for some luxury car brand, her eyes wide with what looked suspiciously like admiration. "The client loved the concept," Julian was saying, his chest puffed out like a peacock. "Said it was exactly the kind of bold thinking they were looking for. Course, it helps when you have the right team executing your vision." His eyes lingered on Lena as he said it, and she practically glowed under his attention. "Julian's being modest," Lena said, turning to address the group. "The campaign was brilliant, really pushed boundaries in ways most agencies wouldn't dare." Vanessa nodded enthusiastically. "That's what separates real leaders from middle management," she said, and I could swear she glanced at me when she said, "middle management." The conversation continued around me, but I felt increasingly invisible. These people lived in a world of client dinners and creative campaigns and office politics that I didn't understand and apparently wasn't welcome to learn about. I was just the husband who showed up to company parties and stood quietly in the corner. After another 20 minutes of listening to Julian hold court while Lena hung on his every word, I decided I needed some air. The rooftop was crowded, but there was a stairwell that led down to the main office floors. I figured I could step away for a few minutes, maybe call it an early night. I was halfway to the stairwell when I heard voices echoing from below. Familiar voices. "Honestly, don't know why you stay with him," Julian's voice drifted up from the landing below. "It's complicated," Lena replied, and my blood turned to ice water. I crept closer to the stairwell entrance, staying in the shadows. "Complicated how?" Julian pressed. "The guy barely counts as a man, Lena. You could do so much better." There was a pause, and when Lena spoke again, her voice was softer, more intimate than I'd heard it in months. "I know," she said. "Believe me, I know. But timing is everything, Julian. I can't just what?" His voice was closer now, like he'd moved toward her. "Can't just throw away 8 years of marriage without a plan," she whispered. "But that doesn't mean I don't think about it. About us." My heart hammered against my ribs as I pressed myself against the wall. I wanted to storm down there and confront them, but something held me back. Maybe it was shock, maybe it was the pathetic hope that I was misunderstanding what I was hearing. "I think about us too," Julian said, his voice husky. "More than I should." I heard the sound of movement, fabric rustling, and then a soft gasp from Lena that made my stomach turn. I couldn't see what was happening, but I didn't need to. The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. When I heard footsteps on the stairs, I quickly moved away from the stairwell and back toward the party. My hands were shaking as I grabbed another champagne from Derek's bar. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Derek observed. "Something like that," I managed. A few minutes later, Lena emerged from the stairwell, her lipstick slightly smudged and her dress wrinkled in a way that made my chest tight. Julian followed about 30 seconds later, straightening his tie and wearing the satisfied smile of a man who'd just gotten exactly what he wanted. They rejoined the party separately, but I caught the looks they exchanged across the crowd. Secret smiles and meaningful glances that excluded everyone else, especially me. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced conversation and fake smiles. I played the part of the dutiful husband while inside. Something dark and cold was taking root. When Lena finally decided she was ready to leave, I followed her to the elevator like an obedient dog. "Did you have fun tonight?" she asked as we waited for the elevator, her tone casual. "Oh yeah," I said, my voice flat. "Real blast. Nothing like watching your wife's boss explain why she's too good for her husband." Lena's eyes flashed with annoyance. "Don't be dramatic, Alex. Julian was just being Julian. You know how he is." "Yeah," I said as the elevator doors opened. "I'm starting to figure out exactly how he is." The next morning, Lena was gone before I woke up. Her side of the bed was cold, and there was a note on the kitchen counter written in her precise handwriting. "Early meeting. Don't wait up tonight. Client dinner. L. No love, no honey, just L," like she was signing a business memo. I sat at our granite breakfast bar, drinking coffee from a mug that read, "World's Greatest Husband," a gag gift from last Christmas that felt more like a cruel joke now. Our townhouse in the historic district was everything Lena had wanted: exposed brick walls, hardwood floors, and a mortgage that kept me awake at night. It was supposed to be our dream home. Now it felt like a museum of a marriage that might have been over before I realized it was dying. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek. "Rough night? You looked like you wanted to murder someone at the party." I typed back, "Just the usual corporate bullshit. Thanks for the drinks. Want to talk about it? I'm working lunch shift at Murphy's today." Murphy's was the dive bar where Derek worked his day job, the kind of place where advertising executives wouldn't be caught dead. It was perfect. "See you at noon," I replied. I spent the morning going through the motions of my weekend routine: laundry, grocery shopping, paying bills, while my mind replayed what I'd overheard on the stairwell. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Not just at Lena and Julian, but at myself for being so blind. How long had this been going on? How many client dinners and early meetings were actually something else entirely? How many times had I been the punchline of a joke I wasn't even aware of? By the time I got to Murphy's, I was ready to punch something. Derek took one look at me and poured a beer without being asked. Okay, spill it. What happened after I left last night? I told him about the stairwell conversation, watching his expression grow darker with each detail. Son of a bitch, Derek muttered when I finished. I knew something was off about that guy. The way he was looking at your wife wasn't exactly subtle. Apparently, I'm the only one who didn't see it coming, I said, taking a long pull of beer. So, what are you going to do? That was the question, wasn't it? The old Alex would have confronted Lena directly, probably gotten into a screaming match that would end with her denying everything and me looking like a paranoid fool. But something had shifted in me last night. Maybe it was hearing her call me less than a man, or maybe it was the way she'd gasped when Julian touched her. Either way, I wasn't feeling particularly interested in playing fair anymore. I need proof, I said. Real proof, not just overheard conversations. Derek nodded slowly. You thinking like private investigator proof? I'm thinking like whatever it takes proof. We sat in silence for a moment, the implications of what I was suggesting hanging between us. You know, Derek said finally, my ex-girlfriend Kira works as an assistant at that agency. She might know something. Would she talk? For the right price, yeah. She never liked your wife much anyway. Said Lena treated the support staff like they were invisible. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Kira's number. Derek had introduced us at a few parties over the years, and she'd always seemed nice enough. More importantly, she had access to places I didn't. Set it up, I said. 3 hours later, I was sitting across from Kira Valdez in a coffee shop downtown, watching her stir sugar into her latte while she told me things about my wife that made my stomach turn. I probably shouldn't be telling you this, Kira said, glancing around nervously. But I hate seeing good people get screwed over, and you seem like good people. How long? I asked. The thing with Julian? Maybe 3 months, but it's been building for longer than that. She stays late a lot, and his car is always the last one in the parking garage when she finally leaves. His car? Black BMW, personalized plates, says Ad King. Real subtle, right? I filed that information away. What else? Kira hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. Look, I shouldn't know this, but I sometimes have to go through Julian's emails for scheduling purposes. There's stuff in there that's personal, between him and Lena. What kind of stuff? The kind that would definitely violate the company's harassment policy if anyone in HR saw it. Julian thinks he's untouchable because he brings in the biggest accounts, but everybody has a boss, you know? An idea started forming in my head. Would you be willing to help me get access to those emails? Kira's eyes widened. I could lose my job. Not if we're smart about it, and not if Julian's not around to fire anybody. We talked for another hour, working out the details. Kira would help me get into the building after hours in exchange for $500 cash, money I'd have to pull from our emergency fund, but this felt like an emergency. She'd also keep her eyes and ears open for any other useful information. There's something else, Kira said as we were getting ready to leave. Vanessa King? She's not as loyal to Lena as she pretends to be. Word around the office is that she's gunning for Lena's job, and she'd throw her under the bus in a heartbeat if it helped her career. Interesting, I said, filing that away too. That evening, Lena came home at almost midnight, claiming her client dinner had run late. She smelled like expensive cologne, not the kind she wore, but the kind Julian had been wearing at the party. How was dinner? I asked from the couch, where I'd been pretending to watch TV. Boring, she said without looking at me. The client is demanding, but the account is worth it. I'm exhausted. I'm going straight to bed. She headed upstairs without kissing me goodnight, something she used to do automatically. I listened to her moving around in our bedroom, probably changing out of clothes that smelled like another man. When I finally went upstairs an hour later, she was already asleep, or pretending to be. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, planning my next move. The following Monday, I put my plan into action. I called in sick to work, something I almost never did, and met Kira in the parking garage of Lena's building at lunchtime. Security guard is Big Joe, Kira explained as we walked toward the employee entrance. He's cool, but he's not stupid. We need to make this look normal. She badged us in through a side entrance, and we took the elevator to the 5th floor where the executive offices were located. The place was mostly empty during lunch hour, with just a few dedicated workaholics hunched over their computers. Julian's in meetings all afternoon, Kira whispered as she led me to his corner office. But we need to be quick. Julian's office was exactly what I'd expected. All glass and chrome and expensive art that probably cost more than my car. His computer was locked, but Kira had come prepared. He never changes his passwords, she said, typing rapidly. It's his birthday, and the year he started the company. Real secure. The screen came to life, and Kira navigated to Julian's email. What I saw there made my hands clench into fists. There were dozens of emails between Julian and Lena, going back months. Most were work-related on the surface, but the subtext was clear to anyone looking for it. References to private meetings and special projects. Jokes about training sessions that made my skin crawl. But it was the most recent exchange that really got to me. From jhawkeagency.com to lmerceragency.com. Subject, tonight. Can't wait to continue our discussion from last week. Your insights on client relations are always so educational. Same place as usual? J. From lmerceragency.com to jhawkeagency.com. Subject, RE. Tonight wouldn't miss it. I've learned so much from your mentoring. See you at 8. L. The timestamp showed it was sent this morning. Can you print these? I asked Kira. Already on it, she said, hitting the print button. But Alex, you need to know. This is just the tip of the iceberg. There's other stuff too. What other stuff? She pulled up Julian's calendar and showed me a recurring appointment every Tuesday and Thursday evening. LM, Strategic Planning Session. Strategic planning, my ass, I muttered. We spent another 20 minutes going through files and emails, printing everything that looked relevant. By the time we left, I had a folder full of evidence that painted a very clear picture of what had been going on behind my back. What are you going to do with all this? Kira asked as we walked back to the parking garage. I'm still figuring that out, I said. But whatever I do, it's going to be surgical. No collateral damage to people who don't deserve it. And the people who do deserve it? I thought about Lena laughing at Julian's joke, about her calling me less than a man, about all the nights she'd come home smelling like someone else. They're going to get exactly what they've earned, I said. That evening, I sat in my home office staring at the printed emails spread across my desk like evidence in a murder case. In a way, I suppose they were. Evidence of the murder of my marriage. The question was what to do with them. The old Alex would have confronted Lena immediately, waving the papers around and demanding explanations. But the old Alex was apparently a fool who didn't deserve his wife. The new Alex was going to be smarter than that. I heard Lena's key in the front door at 10:30 p.m., later than usual, even for her strategic planning sessions. She called out a distracted hello and headed straight for the kitchen, probably to pour herself a glass of wine and decompress from her evening of adultery. How was work? I asked, appearing in the kitchen doorway. She startled slightly, wine bottle in hand. Oh, you scared me. Work was fine. Long day, you know how it is. Strategic planning session with Julian again? Her hand paused on the wine bottle for just a fraction of a second before she continued pouring. Something like that. We're working on a big pitch for next week. Must be some pitch, I said casually. You've been putting in a lot of extra hours lately. That's what it takes to succeed in this business, Alex. Not everyone can work 9 to 5 and call it good. The dig was subtle but clear. I was small time, she was big time, and the gap between us was growing wider every day. Right, I said. Well, don't let me keep you from your wine. You look like you need it. She gave me a sharp look, but I was already heading back to my office. I had work to do. Over the next 2 days, I refined my strategy. Direct confrontation would just lead to denials and gaslighting. Going to HR would be messy and might not accomplish anything if Julian really was as untouchable as everyone seemed to think. No, I needed something more creative. That's when I remembered what Kira had said about Vanessa King. I found Vanessa's personal email through some creative social media stalking and sent her a carefully worded message suggesting we meet for coffee to discuss mutual concerns about workplace dynamics. It was vague enough to be innocent, but specific enough to get her attention. She responded within an hour, suggesting we meet at a Starbucks across town from the agency. Smart girl. She didn't want to be seen talking to me either. Vanessa looked even more stunning in person than she had at the party, all long legs and perfect makeup. But there was something calculating in her eyes that reminded me why Kira had said she couldn't be trusted. This is unexpected, she said, settling into the chair across from me with her skinny latte. What did you want to discuss? I think we both know there are some things happening at your office that aren't exactly professional, I said. Her perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose slightly. Such as? Such as my wife and your boss carrying on an affair that's probably violating about 6 different company policies. Vanessa's expression didn't change, but I caught a flicker of interest in her eyes. That's a serious accusation. It's a serious situation. I pulled out my phone and showed her one of the email exchanges I'd photographed. Serious enough that I'm considering my options. She read the email, her lips pursing slightly. What exactly are you proposing? I'm not proposing anything yet. I'm just gathering information. But I thought you might want to know what's going on, considering your position in the company. My position? Come on, Vanessa. You're ambitious, you're smart, and you're probably tired of watching Lena get ahead based on her extracurricular activities with the boss. I'm guessing you'd like to see a more level playing field. She was quiet for a long moment, stirring her latte thoughtfully. When she spoke again, her voice was carefully neutral. Hypothetically, if someone were to bring these concerns to the attention of the appropriate parties, what would they hope to accomplish? Hypothetically, they might hope to see that merit gets rewarded over favoritism, that people who work hard and play by the rules don't get passed over for people who are willing to bend them. And what would this hypothetical person want in return for their cooperation? Now we were getting to the heart of it. Nothing illegal, nothing unethical, just a fair shake when the dust settles. Vanessa nodded slowly. I might know someone who would be interested in this hypothetical situation. Someone in HR? Someone who believes in maintaining professional standards. We talked for another 20 minutes, dancing around specifics, but understanding each other perfectly. By the time we parted ways, I had a new ally, or at least someone whose interests aligned with mine temporarily. The next phase of my plan required more direct action. I needed concrete proof of what Lena and Julian were doing, something that couldn't be dismissed or explained away. That's where Big Joe came in handy. I'd met Joe a few times when picking Lena up from work, and he'd always seemed like a decent guy. More importantly, he had access to the building's security cameras and wasn't particularly fond of Julian, who apparently treated security staff like furniture. You seem like good people, Joe said when I approached him during his dinner break. Your wife, though, she's got some attitude problems. What do you mean? Acts like I'm invisible most of the time. Won't even say hello when she walks past. But she's real friendly with Mr. Hawke, if you know what I mean. I'm starting to figure that out, I said. Joe, I need a favor. Nothing that would get you in trouble, just some information. Joe listened while I explained what I suspected, nodding grimly. I've seen things, he admitted. Things that didn't seem right. Mr. Hawke's car staying late, your wife's car next to it, them leaving together sometimes. Would you be willing to help me document that? Joe was quiet for a moment, considering. I got a daughter about your wife's age, he said finally. If some married woman was messing around with her husband, I'd want to know about it. Yeah, I'll help you. 2 days later, Joe called me at work. They're both here late again, he said quietly. Parking garage level B2. If you're coming, come now. I made an excuse to my boss about a family emergency and drove across town like my life depended on it. Maybe it did. Joe met me at the garage entrance and led me to a position where we could see Julian's BMW and Lena's Honda parked side by side in an otherwise empty section of the garage. They've been down here about 20 minutes, Joe whispered. Figured you'd want to see for yourself. We didn't have to wait long. The elevator doors opened, and Lena emerged first, looking around carefully before Julian followed. Even from a distance, their body language was unmistakable. The way they stood close together, the way he touched her arm, the way she leaned into him. I pulled out my phone and started recording as Julian backed Lena against his car, his hands on either side of her face. When he kissed her, she melted into him like she hadn't melted into me in years. My hands were shaking as I captured it all. The kiss, the way she ran her fingers through his hair, the way they looked at each other afterward, like they were the only two people in the world. You got what you need? Joe asked quietly. Yeah, I said, my voice hoarse. I got it. But as I watched them separate and get into their respective cars, I realized I wasn't satisfied with just having proof. I wanted them to know I had it. I wanted them to feel the same kind of humiliation I'd felt at that party. Julian was walking to his car when I stepped out of the shadows. Nice evening for a strategic planning session, I said. He spun around, his face going pale when he saw me. Alex, what are you doing here? Funny thing, I said, holding up my phone. I was just asking myself the same question about you and my wife. Julian's eyes flicked to the phone, and I saw him calculating his options. He was bigger than me, probably stronger, but we were in a public place with security cameras everywhere. Look, Alex, I think you might have misunderstood. Misunderstood? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. I misunderstood you shoving your tongue down my wife's throat. I misunderstood her hands in your hair. Exactly which part did I misunderstand, Julian? He tried to step closer, probably hoping to intimidate me, but I stood my ground. You need to calm down, he said, his voice taking on the condescending tone he'd used at the party. You're getting worked up over nothing. Nothing? The word came out louder than I'd intended, echoing through the garage. My wife cheating on me with her boss is nothing. Alex, please. Lena's voice came from behind me. I turned to see her standing by her car, her face a mask of panic and guilt. Please what, Lena? Please pretend I didn't see what I just saw. Please go home and act like everything's normal while you plan your next strategic planning session. Julian moved to stand next to Lena, and the gesture was so proprietary, so possessive, that something snapped inside me. You know what the funny thing is? I said, my voice getting dangerously quiet. At that party you said I didn't deserve her. You were right. I don't deserve a lying, cheating wife who thinks so little of me that she carries on an affair right under my nose. I pulled out my phone and held it up so they could both see the screen. But here's what you do deserve. You deserve to have everyone know exactly what kind of people you are. Julian's face went white. You can't what? Can't show people the truth? Can't let your wife know what you do during your late nights at the office? Can't forward these videos to HR? Alex, wait, Lena said, stepping toward me. We can talk about this. We can work something out. Work something out? I shook my head. Like you worked things out with Julian? Like you worked out how to make me look like a fool while you two played house? I started walking toward the garage exit, but Julian grabbed my arm. You're not thinking clearly, he said. You need to consider what you're doing here. I have a lot of influence in this city. I can make things very difficult for you. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back up at his face. Are you threatening me, Julian? I'm advising you to be smart about this. That's when I did something I'd never done before in my life. I grabbed Julian's wrist and twisted it until he let go of my arm, then slammed his hand against the concrete pillar next to us. Here's some advice for you, I said, as he yelped in pain. Keep your hands to yourself. That goes for grabbing me, and it goes for grabbing my wife. I let go of his wrist and stepped back, adrenaline coursing through my veins. Julian was cradling his hand against his chest, his face twisted with pain and shock. You're crazy, he gasped. No, I said. I'm just done being the nice guy. I walked away, leaving them both standing in the garage, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages, most of them from Lena. I deleted them all without reading them and made coffee while I planned my next move. Vanessa had texted me the night before. Heard there was some excitement in the garage. Are we still moving forward with our discussion? I texted back, more than ever. Can you meet today? Lunch. Same place. By the time I met Vanessa at Starbucks, word had apparently spread through the agency about the parking garage incident. She looked excited, like a shark that had smelled blood in the water. Julian came in this morning with his hand in a brace, she said without preamble. Told everyone he heard it playing tennis, but the security guards are talking. Good, I said. Let them talk. You realize this changes things, right? Physical confrontation makes everything more complicated. It makes it more real, I corrected. No more hiding behind email innuendos and secret meetings. Everyone knows what's going on now. Vanessa leaned forward, her eyes bright with anticipation. So what's the next step? I pulled out a flash drive and slid it across the table. Everything's on there. Emails, photos, video from last night. Your friend in HR might find it interesting reading. She pocketed the drive quickly. And what do you want in return? I want them to face consequences. Real consequences. I want Julian's wife to know what he's been doing. I want the other executives to see what kind of man they've been taking orders from. And I want Lena to understand that actions have repercussions. That's a lot of destruction, Vanessa said. But she didn't sound concerned. If anything, she sounded pleased. They should have thought about that before they decided to humiliate me in public. We spent the next hour going over details. Vanessa's contact in HR was a woman named Patricia Mills, who had apparently been looking for a reason to take Julian down a peg for years. The emails and video would give her all the ammunition she needed. There's something else, Vanessa said as we prepared to leave. Julian's wife doesn't know about any of this. She's some socialite who spends her time on charity boards and garden parties. This is going to destroy her world. That's not my problem, I said, and I was surprised to find that I meant it. The old Alex would have felt guilty about collateral damage. The new Alex was focused on results. By Tuesday afternoon, Patricia Mills had called both Julian and Lena into separate meetings with HR. I wasn't there to see it, but Kira texted me regular updates. Julian went in first, came out looking like he'd seen a ghost. Lena's in there now. Patricia brought the company lawyer. Both of them are meeting with the CEO. This is big. The beauty of corporate bureaucracy is that it moves slowly but thoroughly. HR couldn't just fire Julian and Lena without following proper procedures, especially given Julian's position and the potential legal implications. But they could make their lives very uncomfortable while they investigated. Both Julian and Lena were placed on administrative leave pending a full review of their conduct. Their access to company systems was revoked, their offices were searched, and their colleagues were interviewed about what they might have observed. The gossip mill went into overdrive. Derek called me Wednesday evening with an update from his network of service industry contacts who worked corporate events. "Word is spreading fast," he said. "Julian's wife found out yesterday when some friend of hers called to ask if the rumors were true. Apparently, she threw him out of the house." "Good," I said. "Alex, man, I have to ask, are you okay with all this? I mean, this is some serious scorched earth shit you're pulling here." Was I okay with it? I thought about that question as I sat in my empty house, eating takeout Chinese food and watching the local news. 3 days ago, I would have said no. 3 days ago, I was still hoping there was some innocent explanation for everything I'd seen and heard. But that was before I'd watched my wife kiss another man like she meant it. That was before Julian had threatened me in a parking garage. That was before I'd realized that the person I'd been trying to save my marriage for didn't think I was worth the effort. "I'm fine with it," I told Derek. "They made their choices. Now they get to live with the consequences." Thursday brought more developments. Julian's biggest client, the luxury car company he'd been bragging about at the party, got wind of the scandal and started asking questions about the stability of their account team. 2 other clients followed suit. Vanessa texted me. "CEO is panicking. 3 major accounts are threatening to walk. Julian's not coming back." But the real bombshell came Friday afternoon when Lena finally came home. I was in the kitchen when I heard her key in the door. She walked in looking like she hadn't slept in days, her usually perfect hair disheveled and her designer clothes wrinkled. "We need to talk," she said. "Do we?" I asked, not looking up from my laptop where I was reading the latest updates on a finance blog. "I thought you'd said everything you needed to say to Julian in that parking garage." "Alex, please. I know you're angry." "Angry?" I closed the laptop and looked at her for the first time. "Lena, I'm not angry. Angry is what I was when I overheard you at that party calling me less than a man. Angry is what I was when I found those emails. What I am now is done." She sat down across from me at the kitchen island, and I could see she'd been crying. Under other circumstances, that might have moved me. Now, it just looked like another manipulation tactic. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," she said quietly. "How was it supposed to happen? You and Julian were going to run away together? You were going to ask for a divorce after you'd lined up your next meal ticket? Or were you just planning to keep me around as the stable husband while you had your fun on the side?" "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like, Lena? Explain it to me. Help me understand how my wife of 8 years decided that the best way to handle her marital problems was to screw her boss and then laugh when he humiliated me in public." She flinched at the harsh language, but I was past caring about her delicate sensibilities. "I felt trapped," she said finally. "Our marriage, this house, your job, my job. Everything felt so small and predictable. Julian made me feel alive again." "So you decided to have an affair instead of talking to your husband about it?" "I tried to talk to you, but every time I brought up making changes, you shut down. You were so content with mediocrity, with staying exactly where we were forever." "Mediocrity?" The word hit me like a slap. "Is that what you call our life together? Mediocrity?" "Alex, I didn't mean—" "No, I think you meant exactly that. I think you've meant it for a long time. I think Julian just gave you permission to say it out loud." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 8 years of marriage settling between us like a wall. "What happens now?" she asked finally. "Now you move out," I said. "I've already talked to a lawyer. I'm filing for divorce on grounds of adultery. You can fight it if you want, but I have documentation of everything." Her face went pale. "Alex, you can't be serious. We can work through this. Couples therapy, counseling." "Work through what? Your affair? Your complete lack of respect for me? Your willingness to humiliate me in front of your colleagues? I made a mistake. You made a choice, I corrected. Multiple choices, over multiple months. You chose Julian over me, you chose deception over honesty, and you chose to make me look like a fool rather than end our marriage with dignity. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the neighborhood we'd chosen together when we still believed in our future. The house is in both our names, but I can afford the mortgage on my own. You can take whatever personal belongings you want, but I want you out by Sunday. Where am I supposed to go? I turned back to face her, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. I don't know, Lena. Maybe Julian has some suggestions. Oh wait, I forgot. His wife kicked him out too. Maybe you two can find a place together. Wouldn't that be romantic? She started crying again, but this time it looked real instead of calculated. I never wanted to hurt you, she whispered, but you did hurt me. And the worst part is, you didn't even think I was worth the truth. You thought I was so pathetic, so beneath your notice, that you could just lie to my face every day and I'd never figure it out. I walked past her toward the stairs, then paused. You know what Julian said that night at the party? He said I didn't deserve you. For once in his life, he was absolutely right. I don't deserve a wife who thinks so little of me that she'd rather cheat than leave. I deserve better than that. I left her sitting at the kitchen island and went upstairs to pack her things. It was time for the final phase of my plan. By Sunday evening, Lena was gone. She'd taken her clothes, her jewelry, and her car, leaving behind 8 years of shared memories and a house that felt both too big and too small at the same time. She'd also left behind a forwarding address, Julian's new apartment across town. So they'd ended up together after all. How romantic. I spent Monday morning meeting with my divorce lawyer, a sharp woman named Rebecca Chen, who specialized in high-conflict cases. You have excellent documentation, she said, reviewing the files I'd brought. The adultery is well established, and the emails suggest a pattern of deception that goes back months. This should be relatively straightforward. How long? With this level of evidence? If she doesn't contest it, we could have a decree within 90 days. If she fights it, Rebecca shrugged. Could take a year or more, but the outcome won't change. She'll fight it, I said. She doesn't have a choice. Julian lost his job, and she's probably not going to find another one in this town anytime soon. She needs the settlement money. Then we prepare for a war. But I had other plans for that war, plans that didn't involve lawyers and courtrooms and drawn-out legal battles, plans that were probably not what Rebecca would have advised if I'd told her about them. That evening I called Julian's cell phone. He answered on the third ring, his voice wary. What do you want, Alex? I want to talk, face to face, just the three of us. 3 of us? You, me, and Lena. No lawyers, no HR departments, no corporate policies, just 3 adults having an honest conversation about where we go from here. There was a long pause. Why would we agree to that? Because right now this thing is spinning out of control for all of us. You lost your job, Lena lost hers. I'm looking at a messy divorce that's going to cost everyone a fortune in legal fees. Maybe there's a better way to handle this. What kind of better way? Meet me tomorrow night and find out. I'll text you the address. I hung up before he could respond and immediately called Lena. Alex? She sounded surprised to hear from me. I thought your lawyer said we shouldn't talk directly. This isn't about the divorce. This is about ending this thing without destroying all of us in the process. What do you mean? I gave her the same pitch I'd given Julian. 3 adults, honest conversation, better way forward. She was skeptical, but I could hear the hope in her voice. Hope that maybe there was still a way to salvage something from the wreckage of the last 2 weeks. Where? She asked finally. My family's old cabin up at Lake Morrison. It's neutral territory, private, no distractions. We can say what we need to say without worrying about who's listening. The cabin had been in my family for 30 years, a rustic retreat where my parents used to take me fishing when I was a kid. It was an hour outside the city, surrounded by woods, with no neighbors for miles. Perfect for the kind of conversation I had in mind. "Tomorrow at 7, I said. "Both of you. Don't bring lawyers, don't bring friends, don't bring recording devices. Just come ready to be honest for once in your lives." Tuesday evening, I arrived at the cabin early to prepare. I'd spent the afternoon shopping for supplies and setting up equipment I'd ordered online. Nothing illegal, nothing dangerous, just tools for documentation and persuasion. The cabin itself was exactly as I remembered it. One large room with a stone fireplace, a small kitchen, and a loft bedroom accessible by a narrow staircase. The walls were covered with old family photos and mounted fish that my father had caught over the years. It smelled like pine wood and old memories. I set up a laptop on the dining table and connected it to a projector I'd brought from home. Then I arranged 3 chairs in a triangle facing each other, with the projection screen visible to all of them. On the table, I placed printed copies of all the evidence I'd gathered: emails, photos, witness statements, financial records showing Lena's suspicious expense reports. At exactly 7 o'clock, I heard car doors slamming outside. Through the window, I watched Julian and Lena approach the cabin together, their body language tense but united. They were still a team, even after everything that had happened. That was about to change. "Alex," Julian said as they entered, his voice carefully neutral. "Thank you for suggesting this. I think we all want to find a way forward that works for everyone." "Do we?" I asked, gesturing for them to take seats. "Because I'm not sure we all want the same things." Lena looked around the cabin nervously. "This place hasn't changed much." "Some things never change," I agreed. "Other things change completely when you're not paying attention." I walked to the laptop and pulled up the first slide of the presentation I'd prepared. It was a timeline, starting 6 months ago and tracking the progression of Julian and Lena's relationship through emails, expense reports, and witness observations. "Let's start with honesty," I said, "since that seems to be something we've been short on lately." Julian's face darkened as he recognized his own words on the screen. "What is this?" "This is the truth. All of it. Every email, every lie, every late-night strategic planning session." I clicked to the next slide, which showed a photo I'd taken of them in the parking garage. Every kiss, every betrayal, every moment you two thought you were smarter than everyone around you. Lena stood up abruptly. "Alex, stop this. We came here to talk, not to be ambushed." "Sit down," I said quietly, and something in my voice made her comply. "You came here because you're both desperate. Julian, you lost your job and your wife found out about the affair. Lena, you're facing a divorce that's going to leave you with nothing, because adultery is still grounds in this state. You're both hoping I'm going to be reasonable, that maybe we can work out some kind of deal that saves face for everyone." I clicked to the next slide, which showed bank records and financial documents. "But here's what you don't know. I've been documenting everything for weeks. Not just the affair, but the financial irregularities too. Lena, those client dinners you've been expensing, the ones where you were actually with Julian at his apartment, that's fraud. Julian, those company credit card charges at the hotel downtown, the ones that coincide with Lena's mysterious afternoon meetings, also fraud." Julian's face had gone pale. "You can't prove—" "I can prove all of it," I interrupted. "Receipts, credit card statements, GPS data from your phones, security camera footage from the hotel. You two were so busy playing house that you got sloppy with the details." I clicked to the final slide, which showed a simple choice. Option A, public exposure. Option B, private resolution. "Here's your honest conversation," I said. "You both have a choice to make. Option A, I release everything to the media, the police, your former colleagues, and anyone else who might be interested. Julian, your wife gets copies of everything in the divorce proceedings. Lena, your parents get to see exactly what their daughter has been doing. Everyone in this city's tight-knit business community gets to know the whole sordid story. I paused, letting that sink in. Option B. You both disappear quietly. Julian, you take whatever settlement your wife offers and move somewhere else. Start over, keep your mouth shut, and never contact me again. Lena, you sign the divorce papers without contest, take your personal belongings, and also disappear. No alimony, no property settlement, no continued contact. You can't be serious, Lena whispered. I'm completely serious. You two wanted to play games with people's lives? Fine, but now you get to play by my rules. Julian stood up, his hands clenched into fists. This is blackmail. No, I said calmly. Blackmail would be if I asked for money or favors in exchange for keeping quiet. I'm not asking for anything except for you both to face the consequences of your actions. And if we refuse? Julian asked. I pulled out my phone and showed them a draft email addressed to the local newspaper's gossip columnist, complete with photo attachments. Then everyone gets to know the truth. Your choice. That's when Vanessa stepped out of the kitchen, where she'd been hiding with her own recording equipment. Actually, she said with a smile that was all teeth, I think there might be a third option. Julian and Lena spun around, shock written across their faces. Vanessa? Lena gasped. What are you doing here? Documenting, Vanessa said, holding up her phone. Every word, every threat, every admission. This is going to make fascinating viewing for the right people. I stared at her, realizing I'd been outmaneuvered. What do you want? What I've always wanted, she said. Julian's job, Lena's reputation destroyed, and enough leverage to make sure I get both. She looked at Julian with mock sympathy. Did you really think I was helping Alex out of the goodness of my heart? I've been planning this for months, waiting for the right opportunity. You two handed it to me on a silver platter. The cabin fell silent, except for the sound of wind in the pine trees outside. We all stared at each other, the dynamics of the situation shifting like pieces on a chessboard. So what happens now? I asked. Vanessa's smile widened. Now, we all get what we deserve. The standoff in the cabin lasted exactly 30 seconds before Julian made his move. He lunged toward Vanessa, trying to grab her phone, but she was ready for him. She stepped aside and let him crash into the kitchen counter while she kept recording. Assault and battery, she said cheerfully. That's going to look great in court. You manipulative bitch, Lena snarled, finally showing some real emotion. You planned this whole thing. I planned to advance my career, Vanessa corrected. You two just made it easy by being so spectacularly stupid about your affair. I watched this unfold with a mixture of admiration and horror. I'd thought I was playing chess, but Vanessa had been playing three-dimensional chess while the rest of us were still figuring out how the pieces moved. What exactly do you want? I asked her. From you? Nothing. You've already done your part by gathering all that lovely evidence and getting them both fired. From them? She gestured toward Julian and Lena with her phone. Complete professional and personal destruction. Julian, I want your client list, your industry contacts, and a signed confession about the fraud. Lena, I want you to publicly admit to the affair and resign from any professional organizations you belong to. And if we refuse? Julian asked, still rubbing his shoulder from his collision with the counter. Then this video goes to everyone. Your wife, Alex's lawyer, the district attorney, the business journal, and anyone else who might find it interesting. Plus, I have copies of all the evidence Alex gathered, and I'm not bound by his moral qualms about destroying people's lives. It was beautiful, in a ruthless sort of way. Vanessa had manipulated all of us into giving her exactly what she needed to eliminate her competition and advance her career. She'd used my desire for revenge, Julian's arrogance, and Lena's desperation to create a situation where she held all the cards. You know what? I said, standing up and walking toward the door. I'm done with all of you. Alex, wait, Lena called after me. We still need to resolve. No, I said, turning back to face them. We don't need to resolve anything. Vanessa, congratulations on your promotion. I'm sure you'll be very successful at the agency. Julian, enjoy explaining to your wife how you lost your job and your mistress in the same week. Lena, I'll see you in divorce court. I walked outside and got in my car, leaving the three of them to sort out their own mess. Through the cabin windows, I could see them still arguing, Vanessa still recording, Julian still looking like he wanted to hit someone. My phone rang as I was driving back to the city. It was Derek. "How did it go?" he asked. "Not exactly as planned," I said, and told him about Vanessa's surprise appearance and her own agenda. Derek whistled low. "Damn, man. She played all of you." "Yeah, she did. But you know what? I'm okay with it. Julian and Lena still get what they deserve, and I don't have to be the bad guy anymore." "So what happens now?" "Now I go home, pour myself a drink, and start figuring out what the rest of my life looks like." The next morning brought a flood of developments. Vanessa had apparently wasted no time in leveraging her new position. Julian's confession and client list had been delivered to the agency's CEO by 9 a.m., along with a detailed proposal for how Vanessa could salvage the accounts that Julian had put at risk. Lena's public resignation from the Professional Women in Marketing organization made the local business newsletter by noon, complete with a vague statement about personal conduct incompatible with professional standards. My phone buzzed with a text from Kira. "Vanessa got promoted to VP this morning. Julian's been banned from the building. Lena's stuff was boxed up and left at the front desk." I was almost impressed by how efficiently Vanessa had dismantled both of their careers. She really was going to be successful in the advertising world. Rebecca Chen called me that afternoon with an update on the divorce proceedings. "Your wife's attorney called this morning," she said. "They want to settle. No contest, no alimony, minimal property division. Apparently she's eager to get this resolved quickly." "How quickly?" "They're proposing 30 days if you're willing to let her keep her car and personal belongings." "Done," I said. "What about the house?" "All yours. She's also agreed to pay half the outstanding mortgage balance from her 401k. It was better than I'd hoped for. Lena was clearly desperate to put this behind her and start over somewhere else. I couldn't blame her. Her reputation in this city was finished. That evening, I was sitting on my back deck with a beer, finally starting to relax for the first time in weeks, when I heard a car door slam in my driveway. I walked around to the front of the house to find Julian standing next to his BMW, which now had a large dent in the passenger side door. "We need to talk," he said. "No, we don't," I replied. "I think we've said everything we need to say to each other." "You destroyed my life. You destroyed your own life. I just documented it." He stepped closer, and I could smell alcohol on his breath. "My wife took everything. The house, the cars, the bank accounts. She's filing for divorce and claiming emotional distress. I'm going to lose everything." "Good," I said. "Maybe next time you'll think twice before threatening someone in a parking garage." "I never threatened you. You told me you could make things difficult for me. You grabbed my arm. You tried to intimidate me into keeping quiet about your affair with my wife. That sounds like a threat to me." Julian's face was flushed with anger and alcohol. "You think you're so smart, don't you? You think you won?" "I think I survived," I said, "which is more than I can say for your marriage or your career." He took another step closer, his hands clenched into fists. "Maybe it's time someone taught you what winning actually looks like." That's when Big Joe stepped out from behind my neighbor's hedge, where he'd apparently been waiting. "Evening, Mr. Mercer," Joe said casually. "Thought I heard voices out here. Everything okay?" Julian spun around, his face going pale when he saw Joe's massive frame. "Just having a conversation," Julian said, his voice suddenly much less aggressive. "Looked like more than a conversation from where I was standing," Joe said, moving to stand next to me. "Looked like maybe someone was thinking about doing something stupid." Julian looked between Joe and me, clearly calculating his odds. Whatever conclusion he reached, it wasn't favorable. "This isn't over," he said, but the fight had gone out of his voice. "Yeah, it is," I said, It's been over since the moment you decided to sleep with my wife. You just didn't realize it yet. Julian got back in his car and drove away, his tires squealing as he turned the corner. Joe watched until his taillights disappeared. "Friend of yours?" Joe asked with a grin. "Something like that? Thanks for the backup." "No problem. I was in the neighborhood anyway. Thought I'd check on you. Heard through the grapevine that things got interesting up at that cabin." News travels fast. Always does in this town. Word is that Vanessa King is the new golden girl at the agency, and your ex-wife and her boyfriend are both looking for jobs in other cities. "Good," I said. "Maybe they'll find what they're looking for somewhere else." Joe nodded and headed back to his car. "Take care of yourself, Mr. Mercer, and if that guy comes around again, give me a call." 3 weeks later, I signed the final divorce papers in Rebecca Chen's office. Lena wasn't there. She'd already moved to Atlanta, where she'd apparently found a job with a smaller marketing firm that hadn't heard about her recent troubles. "It's done," Rebecca said, handing me the decree. "You're officially divorced." I stared at the paper for a moment, surprised by how anticlimactic it felt. 8 years of marriage reduced to a legal document and a file folder. "How do you feel?" Rebecca asked. "Free," I said, and realized I meant it. That evening, Derek and I met at Murphy's to celebrate. The bar was crowded with the usual mix of blue-collar workers and office refugees, the kind of people who didn't care about advertising scandals or corporate drama. "So what's next?" Derek asked, raising his beer in a toast. "I don't know," I said, clinking my bottle against his. "Maybe I'll travel. Maybe I'll change careers. Maybe I'll just enjoy not having to worry about what my wife is doing when she says she's working late." "Any regrets?" I thought about that question as I looked around the bar. Did I regret the way things had ended? Did I regret the pain I'd caused, the lives I'd disrupted, the relationships I'd destroyed? "No," I said finally. "They made their choices. I just made sure they faced the consequences." Derek nodded approvingly. "To consequences," he said. "To consequences," I agreed. As we drank our beers and watched the game on TV, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. The anger was gone. The humiliation was gone. The desperate need to prove myself was gone. In their place was something simpler and cleaner. The satisfaction of a job well done. Julian and Lena had thought they were so clever, so sophisticated, so much better than the boring husband who couldn't see what was happening right under his nose. They'd laughed at me, dismissed me, treated me like I was invisible. But in the end, the invisible man had seen everything. And sometimes, the underdog doesn't just bite back. He bites hard enough to leave scars that never heal. I raised my beer in a silent toast to my former wife and her former boss, wherever they were tonight. They'd taught me an important lesson about human nature, about loyalty, about the price of betrayal. I hoped they'd learned something too.